Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. Russ here with Mike in muggy Japan.
Yeah, it's muggy and we had some storms today, boy. And yet here I am, really high energy with my Corvo white wine today.
It's a nice summer drink.
Yeah, nice summer drink. I'm going for the cold beverages in the summer. I think I'll go back to the harder stuff in the winter when I really need it.
Well,
to keep warm among other things and sane.
I roasted a chicken for dinner. I was going to cook it outside with a little smoke, and that's when I saw the radar with those huge storms coming. So I opted for inside with a. Well, I could have gone white wine, but I had this Primitivo that I really wanted to try out, so. I had that, and now I've switched over to the official beverage of adult music.
Drink.
Yes, the official drink.
The official drink of adult music. Sorry, I stepped on that. The official drink of adult music.
Knob Creek Single Barrel, which once the sun goes down, you can never have too much of Knob Creek Single Barrel.
Single barrel. Yeah, single barrel, everybody. The other one's good, too.
It's okay. Yeah, but
it's good, but this one's special. I like it.
In this world we live in with uncertainties, the money you would save on the regular one, you couldn't spend it on anything better in these times. So that's what we recommend. And you're supporting
an American company there, so that's there you go.
Good old
so it's
Kentucky.
A win-win for everybody.
Yeah, so this is episode 22, just on the heels of bonus episode 2, our second interview with Gil Rose, the musical director and conductor of the Boston Modern Orchestra project that we released on Friday.
Yeah, what does he call it? Bebop?
Bebop.
I was thinking BMOP. They call it Bebop.
Bebop, like bebop, but not. That's what he said. Yeah. I thought that was kind of catchy.
That's right. That's good. That's pretty clever, you got to say. Yeah.
So that's an excellent interview. A good interview. Anyone who likes modern music and wants to see what's on the cutting edge of the frontier of modern music, especially American music. And,
well, let's say 20th century music.
20th, yeah. I guess.
Yeah, there's some contemporary music in there, too. Everything we talked about was sort of 20th century.
20th century.
Or John Adams would be contemporary, though.
He hinted that they're interested in recording what's happening now, and they look at any submissions and things from modern composers. So, who knows what direction they'll go, because they record so much. I mean, they're just launching these recordings out there one after the other. So,
I didn't mention this to him, but I'm going to put this out there. I hope they record and release some music by Christopher Rouse, because I like his music a lot. American composer, deceased a few years ago. We talked about him on the Grammy episode because we heard his Symphony No. 5.
Right.
So I want to hear some of that.
This stuff is exciting.
I like it. Yeah. There's a lot of unrecorded music by him still, so I still want to hear.
Right.
So there it is. All right.
But as we usually do, we're going to, I guess it's kind of going back to Baroque start tonight in the classical sections, kind of at the end. This
would be I guess they'd call this the Galant style, because Galant came between Baroque and classical.
It's sort of the bridge there.
All right, let me explain this to listeners who might just be listening to it because they like our goofy style and they don't they didn't study music. Okay, the Baroque era was like Bach's era, so it was like it started in Italy in the 1600s. In fact, in the year 1600, they actually picked the year. There's even a date. I can't even remember what it is off the top of my head. I should be able to. But there's a date in the year 1600 where the first successful opera was performed. The first opera was performed around 1597. And then in the year 1600, there was a specific date when they say Baroque music began on this date. Wow. Which is kind of funny. If you think, because when we think about this, we think it kind of reminds me of, when you think about this, you have this idea, like when you study, like everybody suddenly stopped composing like the Renaissance era choral music and everybody started
there's a moratorium
composing in the Baroque style, which is not the case at all. In fact, this is interesting for listeners, a little fun fact for all of you out there. The word Baroque is a pejorative term. Okay, it's it was kind of an insult aimed at this kind of music. This very busy, gaudy music was referred to as Baroque, like overly busy. It's like not as lean and beautiful as the Renaissance era Mass. Okay, but the name stuck, and we still call this music Baroque music. It's actually an insult.
Can we use pejoratives with our clean rating on our podcast?
We can use Baroque. I understand that one is,
it's acceptable.
Actually, if we were in the year 1600, they might, if we were doing this podcast in the year 1600, they might take us down for using that word. But it's not a pejorative in that sense.
Well, we could call it son of Baroque.
Son of Baroque.
Kind of, yeah.
Then there are all those lame jokes again. Well, I didn't Baroque it. Get out of here with that. Okay. None of that here.
None of that.
Okay. All right, well, anyway, so the Baroque era really culminated with Handel and Bach, and it's really considered to be to end with the death of Bach, although Handel died like 7 years after him, so it really kind of continued. And then the classical era. Now, this is not to be confused with classical music. Classical music with a... music scholars are the worst. They come up with these really terrible terms. The classical style, because it was aiming at the kind of like clarity of line that they saw in ancient Greek and Roman statues, the classical era. So the clarity of line in like music like Haydn and Mozart and then Beethoven would have been the end of the classical era and really the beginning of something else. In fact, Robert Greenberg calls Beethoven's period of composing the Beethoven era, because he's not really romantic, but he's not classical either. He's just Beethoven. But until Haydn and Mozart really perfected this style, we decided it was going to be, that was really the way to go. There was something called the Galant style, and it was more, it was aiming towards the classical style, but it was kind of more varied, and it was kind of, scholars kind of think of it as dull music. It's not interesting things happening in it, but it's really nice. I mean, it's good to listen to.
Well, this fellow who we're going to listen to has lots of interesting stuff happening in his music.
He does, and in fact, the composer we're talking about, I don't know, it shouldn't be a secret because people have probably read the name in the listing already before they turn the podcast on. It's Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, the oldest surviving son of the great Johann Sebastian Bach. He's the second son overall. Okay, but he was the oldest surviving son, and he wound up in Hamburg. He was the Kapellmeister in Hamburg during his lifetime. He's also a big favorite of the Adult Music podcast. Russ and I have bonded over his music over the years. There have been some pretty good recordings. He's made a big comeback. Okay. Now he's Johann Sebastian Bach's oldest surviving son, and he was also friends with Mozart. Mozart really loved his music, and you can kind of tell why. Mozart was said to be a bit of a practical joker. He liked a good joke. He liked to laugh a lot. He wasn't quite the laughing hyena that we see in the movie Amadeus, but he was kind of sort of witty. Let's say he liked good wit, as did Haydn, by the way. Joseph Haydn. Anyway, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach had a good musical sense of humor, and we hear a lot of it in this recording. Let me just say what it is. It's an album called Beyond the Limits, played by Gli Incogniti, the Unknowns. Gli Incogniti. No, is it? Yeah, maybe. I think it's the Unknowns. And Amandine Beyer is the director of this group. Okay, now. And the album is called Beyond the Limits. It's on Harmonia Mundi. The Harmonia Mundi label, French label.
Symphonies, right?
Yeah, the Complete String Symphonies. Beyond the Limits, Complete String Symphonies. So this is all of the... there's a set of them. There are 6 of them that were kind of released, I guess, together as a set. And then there's one extra, I think, that doesn't belong to the set. All right, String Symphonies. Now, part of the reason you haven't heard much of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's music is because it's got a lot of little jokey sort of things in it. Like there's a lot of if we think about Baroque music, there are a lot of motor rhythms and sort of things like that. And Carl Philipp Emanuel, CPE, let's just call him, enjoys like just having that rhythm going and then just slamming on the brakes and like, whoa, you kind of get this kind of feeling of being lurching forward or something when that happens. There's some odd harmonies like that come at really odd places, and it's up to the performer to kind of put these jokes across by way of timing. Not an easy thing to do, and not something that all professional musicians do. I've heard quite a few performers of CPE Bach's music play it and just play it straight, and they just kind of play over these little sort of like harmonic indelicacies and stuff like that without really doing anything to make it the punchline that it should be.
Right.
Okay. And it just doesn't come across as well. You wind up thinking, oh, it's not as good as Mozart. I'm saying Mozart tonight. I don't know why. All right, Mozart. Yeah, it's not as good as him. And I guess it's not, but it's good in its own right. Okay. It's worth hearing, let's say, especially in good performances. And I'm happy to say this is one of them. This is one worth hearing. Mm-hmm. If you're going to start a Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, start listening to his music. The ensemble, in really all six of these, they're kind of similar, really. Mm-hmm. They're all three movement works, and they tend to blend together. You don't get like one movement pause. One tends to go into the other, and this is, I think, part of the appeal and the humor, where like part of the slamming on the brakes is suddenly slowing down into this slow movement all of a sudden. Before you know it, you're in the second slow movement. And you don't really realize what happened, okay? And this ensemble really gets him. They put his musical personality across exceptionally well. A lot of the there are sometimes these sort of contrasting lines in the cellos that kind of like kind of contrast with what's happening in the violins, and they make that really loud and sort of kind of. Make sure you hear it as something that really seems not to belong there, but is intruding into the musical texture. There are the usual slamming on the brakes, the cheerful endings with the figuration interrupted. I really enjoyed this a lot. She really gets it. She got the jokes, and this is Amandine Beyer, the director, and the ensemble got the jokes and really put them across. So if you're looking for an in or a way to start enjoying Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's music, this is a good place to start, I thought.
I like this one a lot. The recording is excellent too. The strings, the strings have this kind of very lively tone, and as you mentioned, the performances, they capture the really tight energy. I feel like CPE Bach has to be played really tightly in order to get those, sudden things that happen in his music. And that energy is here it shows the playfulness of his style really well. And when I heard this one, it made me want to go back to the other recording I think we've listened to together. And I'd recommend this as a companion set. So these are the string symphonies, and there's a 2015 Hyperion recording of the full symphonies of CPE Bach. That's by Rebecca Miller and the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. And so,
I don't remember that one as well. I got to listen to that again.
I think that one also captures that, sort of energy, sort of stop on a dime, do something unexpected, somewhat humorous, but, with a broader orchestration. And so both of these, I think, are really good in that sort of display of his music and in the humorous, interesting points of it. You get a feeling like, as a kid, he was sitting around listening to his father play all this stuff, and he absorbed it. And then he, in Baroque music, there's a lot of beauty, but there's a lot of that, sort of required structure. So you get this idea that he was thinking where all the jokes could be put into those lines, and
there's some humor in there, I can just put it in there.
It's done so well and enjoyably. I always like to listen to his music in the morning, so I like this recording as much as I liked that other one, and I would recommend them as a set. But this one is definitely good sound quality, great performances, and something to listen to. Clean
string textures too. It seemed like there was a lot of space in this recording too, and that gives room for the humor to kind of come through, because you kind of hear it creeping in, from sort of just because of the change in texture, or in harmony or things like that. It was this is a really nice recording. What did I want to say about this? It was Carl. If you're someone who's interested in humor in music, now, Beethoven's, Haydn especially, Mozart and even Beethoven have humor in their music, though it's a little harder to kind of identify, especially with Beethoven, because we kind of think of him as being so serious. Everybody's like, there are all these
paintings.
There was paintings of him with a furrowed brow, but there's quite a bit of humor in Beethoven's music, including the symphonies. I think at the end of the Second Symphony, the last movement of the Second Symphony, or there are others, but I can come up with them. But yeah, some of them really are very deadly serious, like the Fifth Symphony and the Third. There's no. Although the Third Symphony does have kind of humor in the fourth movement, the kind of like dancey sort of. I suppose it does. Yeah. It's a little surprising, but if you're interested in that idea, it's all about the timing, as comedians will let you know, and. Recordings like this require classical musicians to have a sense of timing and an awareness of harmony as well to put this humor across. This is kind of serious music that's kind of humorous. It's not like Victor Borge or something like that.
No, it's all in the way
going for humor.
I think it's all in the rhythm, the way he gets these momentums going, and then things sort of shift, and you've got this huge momentum going in one direction, and now you're headed in a completely different direction. Yeah. And I get
think
that in
it's
all
kind of like being
music.
at the bumper cars in the amusement park where you kind of crash into the other car and suddenly you're off in another direction. It kind of feels a little like that.
I always enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. Please don't confuse CPE Bach with PDQ Bach, who's not a real Bach. He's an invention of Peter Schickele. Also worth hearing, by the way, because they're very humor, funny, these compositions. Yes. But this isn't the same type of humor. This is actually something from back in the 18th century. And I kind of get the idea that Peter Schickele, when he invented PDQ Bach, must have been aware of CPE's music. It's a different kind of humor, but nevertheless, it's the same kind of sense, the same kind of clever sort of way of thinking about music that kind of leads to both of these.
It's sort of taking, the established patterns and developments, and then, playing with people's expectations and sort of turning them on their ear. You can tell that he's amusing himself when he's doing that with these changes of directions, and hoping that the listener will probably
not only that, Mozart loved this music, and if you listen to it, you'll kind of get a feeling of what kind of person Mozart was. Okay, he seemed to be a pretty easy person to be around, as long as he wasn't begging for money. But he, despite his unbelievable genius, he was a person that liked a good laugh, apparently, and was clever about that. So I imagine that CPE Bach and Mozart must have had a good time together when they were hanging around. CPE was the older of the two, by the way. All right, I guess we're done with that. There's not really much to say about it, except that it's really fun. It's a good album.
Check it out.
Yeah, there we go. We're okay. All right, so CPE Bach recommended. Amandine Beyer, Die Incogniti, the unknowns.
Where are they? Who are they?
I hope I'm getting that right off the top of my head. The Incogniti. Who are they? They're the Incogniti. All right, it's kind of a cool name. Yeah, incognito, right? It means that you're kind of in disguise.
Yes. I see them, but I don't believe them.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, I guess we're going to have to go on to the next thing.
Jumping forward in time.
Yeah, way forward in time. We're in the early 20th century now with Claude Debussy. Now, this album recently came out, and if you're interested in classical music, you probably heard about it. This is because Martha Argerich is on it, one of the great pianists of the 20th century. Okay, and she just celebrated her 80th birthday. Wow. And she's actually, this recording was made in 2018, so she was much younger at the age of 77 when she made this recording. And it sounds great, I have to say. Yeah. She's got a nice facility at the piano still in her older age. It's nice to hear. Now, first of all, when this was released, just the fact that she was on it was advertised, and we heard a lot about that. But this is really a Daniel Barenboim album. He's the conductor, and he plays on all of the tracks. There are two chamber music tracks on this too, and he plays on both of them. Yeah, that's right. This program includes Debussy's very early Fantaisie pour piano et orchestre, the Fantaisie for piano and orchestra. And this is Barenboim conducting and Martha Argerich playing the piano part. The other works are too late, really two of the last works that Debussy composed in his life, two chamber works, the Violin Sonata and the Cello Sonata. Now, on these two recordings, Barenboim is playing the piano, along with his son, Michael Barenboim, playing the violin and the Violin Sonata, and Kian Soltani on the cello on those. And the very last work is the orchestral work La Marea, one of my favorite works, by the way. I love Debussy's music, really. This is a happy week for me because I heard old music I really like.
And this is Deutsche Grammophon here, too. Right?
Yes, on Deutsche Grammophon. And Barenboim is the conductor of that piece. He is conducting the Staatskapelle Berlin. Okay. Anyway, this recording, I have to say, really struck me. I liked it a lot. It's a little different than what you usually hear. Now, the Fantaisie pour piano et orchestre, I'm really familiar with this from one of our favorite pianists, Jean-Flamme Bavouzet's performance from 6 or 7 years ago. Now, he goes for a more sort of pastel approach, shall we say. Like, he's really going for the tone. He's a French pianist. It figures he would, really. Yeah. He's going for the timbre. He wants the all those kind of beautiful sounds in the symphony register.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in this case, with Argerich at the piano and giants, really, Barenboim conducting and Argerich at the piano, the both of them go more for phrasing. And this was really interesting for me because this piece, and Debussy's pieces in general, the form seems to be melting. I kind of think of like Dali's melting clocks or something like that. Like the sections kind of melt into each other. You're not really sure where one ends and one begins. And it just sounds like one big block of music. Now, in this particular piece, this is a very early Debussy work. They work really hard on the what we call them, the phrases, let's say. I don't want to say motifs because they're not really motifs, but just the phrasing, and it kind of gives the work like focus and definition that it didn't have in the earlier Bavouzet recording, which is actually excellent anyway. But it's just a different approach. So I really liked that. I liked hearing it like this. There was a lot of orchestral detail that popped out because of this approach. Just because I guess the phrasing just sort of set off certain elements in the orchestra. And Argerich is playing she doesn't really have to do anything super virtuosic in this work, but nevertheless, there's still some pretty serious scales and runs on the piano, and she just executes them perfectly. It's just fantastic. This is a 77-year-old woman now, just playing beautifully. Gets a beautiful sound. Phrasing is all perfect. This is a really beautiful performance of this work, and well worth your time to hear. I found the same qualities in the two chamber works, and I love these works to the skies, really. These the Violin Sonata, first of all. Father and son playing this, Daniel Barenboim on the piano and Michael Barenboim on violin. Again, highly realized phrasing, like where all the breaths are going to be, were very clearly thought out, and this brings out a lot of hidden elements in the textures. I liked this a lot because this piece has a lot of changing sort of rhythm within the overall pulse of the work, as does the cello sonata, and you can hear all those changes very clearly with the way the phrasing is done. Right? They actually kind of seem to highlight these elements. So I felt like I came away with this with a deeper understanding of how the work is put together. And the same is true for the cello sonata. The cello is played by Kian Soltani, as I said. Same thing. I've always really loved this work. And I also like the way in this one, in the very opening, the piano starts. When I hear recordings of this work, the piano tends to drown out the cello's entrance. And that is not the case here. I think Barenboim kind of steps back a little bit and really gives us Kian Soltani the spotlight. And his entry is really nice on this really deep bass note rising up. Really beautiful. Also by the way, if you want to hear a great recording of this, there was one made by Mstislav Rostropovich and Benjamin Britten at the piano years ago. They really executed this really well.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really famous recording. Nothing like a composer kind of playing music because they see all the elements. Barenboim is sort of the same or similar here because I remember playing this on a recording for somebody once, and the middle movement has a lot of like these pizzicati in the cello, and it's a bit abstract, shall we say.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, "Oh, I don't like modern music," which this is, but it doesn't come across as modern music. It was just that particular performance. I think here again the phrasing just kind of makes it all fit in beautifully. And then there's this really joyful ending movement in the cello sonata. I liked it a lot.
I really like this because of Soltani's tone. It's extremely warm, but also very delicate.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's more delicate than most other cello tones that I've heard on here. It still works really, really well, but it's seemingly sort of disparate qualities to it. When he's bowing on these notes, the tone is extremely warm, but it's never overpowering. As you said, Barenboim is careful to not overpower the cello on the piano, especially in the intro, but I think he allows him to play it rather softly. And,
that could be. Yeah.
So I really felt it's a delicate performance and well nuanced, which matches the character of it. So I especially liked the cello piece on here.
Yeah, in fact, I would say well nuanced is a good description for the first three works on this album. Okay, then we get to La Mer, and I think this performance sort of lets down the side. I didn't really think much of this. Now, part of the problem with it for me is that the bass end is way too loud. Right? I think it sounds like there's a lot of bass instruments. Now, we remember that this is not a French orchestra, by the way. It's a German one. It's the Staatskapelle Berlin. And we remember from a recording that we talked about a few weeks ago, it was Le Siècle, Franz Xavier Roth, where he said that French orchestras tend to play with the heavier bass. And I'm wondering if Barenboim really took that rather literally and just added bass to the to this particular ensemble. It's a little overpowering, and it kind of overshadows a lot of the delicate tonality of the higher end. I think the French would know how to do this, but one of the things I got from this is Debussy is rather his entire style that he arrived at in the early 20th century with works like La Mer and starting with Prélude à l'après-midi d'enfant started with it was kind of a reaction against the music of Richard Wagner, the operas, who had really influenced or infected everyone, depending on your perspective, during the late 19th, early 20th century. And Debussy was writing, he began with this kind of like lighter style, but he was very heavily influenced by Wagner in the beginning, as was everybody. But he eventually found a way out of that. And I almost feel like in this performance that Barenboim is trying to highlight the Wagnerian elements of this score. Now, it's true, I guess you never get rid of your earlier style entirely, but the whole texture of this work is it's much lighter than anything. Well, Wagner had lighter textures too, but Wagner was really well known for these beautiful, brass long brass lines and just these very long beautifully highly textured passages. And in La Mer here, Barenboim takes a slower tempo than normal, and whenever I heard the brass or the cellos or the basses, I almost felt like he was trying to bring out something Wagnerian in them, and I don't really think they're there as much as he's trying to say they are, if I'm correct in imagining this. But that's what I heard when I listened to this. Some of my things, I know this work very well, and I like it a lot. And I think and I still haven't, I don't have an ideal recording of this yet. I have lots of them, and they're all kind of...
Yeah, I have a lot of them too, but...
Yeah. None of them is really blowing me away. There are some I like more than others. But this one, it kind of... it obscures, because of the bass and because of all this, it obscures a lot of the detail that I really love in this work. Now, on the plus side, as with the other three works on this disc, he kind of on this album, I guess, he Barenboim sort of phrases everything beautifully. There's like a beginning and an end to a phrase. It's a very German way of playing, really. This is where this ends, and then the next one begins here. Debussy's music, though, isn't constructed like that. It's constructed so that it'll kind of like melt into the next phrase. I think this started with Fauré, who was trying to sort of get a feeling for trying to make French an authentically French music, and using the French language as a model, whereas like words will kind of like melt into each other, sort of like they don't stop like one je suis, like there's kind of like that. There's no silence in between the words, and I think they sort of are, that Fauré and then Debussy especially really arrived at a style like that. But we're kind of aware of this kind of like, I think, attempt to find sections in this work where there really shouldn't be any, and it's sort of it interrupts the whole flow, I feel like. And he does kind of like do these like really momentary pauses between where he ends one phrase and begins another to kind of indicate, oh, this is the next panel in the big painting that is this score. And it doesn't really work for this work. It's got a flow like the sea, like the ocean doesn't have any divides in it, right? It's just all waves. And I think Debussy was after something like that. The middle movement is called Jeu de Vague, which is the game or play of the waves, like something like that, is kind of famous for not having any repeating material. It sort of goes from one section to another to another to another, and it just doesn't. There's nothing really to hold on to, really, except that in Debussy's music, the timbre really carries the sound that the instruments are making really carry the meaning. It's not really in the melodies, and so I think this approach really the Barenboim's approach really breaks down in this particular movement. He gets some ominous things in the last movement, Dialogue du vent et de la mer, which means the dialogue or conversation between the wind and the sea. So you get like a sea storm in there, which is very cool. But they're just, I don't know. There are just too many. There's so many beautiful details in this work, and they just don't come across in this particular performance. Now, I would say my conclusion about this album is that you want to hear it for the first three works, which are all beautifully done, but I feel like there are better recordings of La Mer out there. And that's what I would say about this.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I didn't think so critically about La Mer, but having other recordings of it, when I got to that, I sort of unconsciously tuned out, and
that's what you tend to do.
Yeah,
you say,
I had a general feeling that I've heard this better on other recordings. I have I have Charles Dutoit and a couple other.
Dutoit was a great one for orchestral timbre.
Yeah, and a few other recordings. Plus, we had all that Debussy series in the last year or so.
2 years ago, that was. Yeah, that was on the Harmonia Mundi Debussy series. Those were mostly good. Some of them were a little odd, but they were all interesting. I liked them all.
But definitely, I was listening intently through the chamber program on the earlier part of this recording, which, as we said, is really good. So, yeah, at least for those works, it's definitely worth listening to. They're really good, and it has that wonderful Deutsche Grammophon recording quality to it. Yeah. So the sound quality is wonderful. And very nice performances on the chamber works. Father-son. The family chemistry seems to add something to it. The sort of synchronized understanding in the phrasing and things. And then I really enjoyed the cello work too. La Mer, I thought, was nothing special for this interpretation, and maybe a bit cloudy.
His approach, his approach on the two chamber works were just fantastic. I thought those were really beautiful. They were a little different. Mm-hmm. See, now one thing you said, Russ, was like, and you said, I've heard better performances of this, and we don't really. I think we don't want to really be thinking about. Once you think better, what you're saying is you don't want to really hear this performance again. But the thing is, what you're going for is really, you want to hear different, just interesting. Okay. But this one wasn't in that category. I didn't feel like, I thought the same thing. I thought other recordings were better, and I would rather hear them.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I've heard maybe better performances of the violin and cello sonata, but these were really interesting. They were a little different. I kind of, I really kind of took to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were intriguing. Well, I liked all the rhythmic quality to it.
When I first looked at this, when, you put this on the list, I said, well, I've heard all of these many times, so that's...
And we will hear them many more times because they're just so great. I love them.
So that's the thing with this kind of repertoire. It has to either be better or different, because you just don't want to hear the same or less of, a lesser quality, or, not even quality, but, something that catches and moves you here. So I think, the first part, definitely different. Maybe not the best or in comparison, but certainly worth hearing for the uniqueness of the interpretation. And then,
and the big selling point on this album, of course, is the great Martha Argerich playing, and she is indeed great in her performance. So it's worth hearing for that as well.
Yeah. So,
okay. So we're
well-recorded works, and now we're going to launch into outer space.
Yes, we are. Different. From here, we are going into the stratosphere, into the contemporary era with Magnus Lindberg. He's a... where is he from? I think he's Danish.
Finnish. No, is he Danish? No, the orchestra is Finnish, but he's Finnish. Yeah,
he's Finnish too. Okay, yeah. Oh, man, I'm so messed up. Yeah, Lindberg. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, Magnus Lindberg, contemporary composer, and he is indeed Finnish. I can't believe I said he was Danish. I feel like an idiot now. He is indeed Finnish. Okay. Because I think of like people like Raul Tavada and of course Sibelius, and he doesn't really sound like either of them. So I don't know.
Well, this is a memoriam of Lutoslawski, right? So
the first piece, Aura.
Yeah.
Okay, now first of all, let me just say, when I prepare for this podcast, if we're doing music like CPE Bach or like Debussy, music that I know really, really well, I'll make a few notes about the recording, maybe 2 or 3 sentences, just so I can remember to say certain points. But then this came along, and I really should just publish the notes, because they almost make up an entire book. Because it's all new, and you don't really know what to say about it. You're trying to make an impression for this very complicated music for the first time. Anyway, Magnus Lindberg, or it's probably Magnus. Okay, I should say it the right way. Okay. The first work is called Aura, and it's dedicated to Witold Lutosławski. Interestingly, before I get to that, I should mention this work has been recorded before by Oliver Newson, British conductor. He did a recording of this 21 years ago. We haven't heard this piece on record for 21 years, I don't think. So this is only the second time I think it's ever been recorded. It's a pretty big work for a large orchestra. Now, it's dedicated to Lutosławski, and I imagine that there are people out there saying, well, who's Lutosławski? I don't know who Lindberg is. Now I got to know who Lutosławski is too. Lutosławski was a Polish composer, and he was one of the people who I think sort of broke free of the 20th century fixation on serialism. He was kind of looking for a way to express himself. Serialism was sort of becoming sort of mechanical. You would just plug these kind of formulas in, and the music would sort of write itself. And he wanted something a little different than that. And he came up with, let's just say, various techniques. A lot of them had to do with having a large orchestra and then using smaller elements in that orchestra. Schoenberg did that too, but it's actually early 20th century writers did. But actually, I don't know why I'm mentioning this. Okay, Lutosławski came up with these ideas of aleatory writing, where you'd have this phrase to play, but you could play it any time you want. I don't think that happens in this piece. But Aura it's for a large orchestra. And there are a lot of sounds in this work. Okay.
Yes. Well, when I read the notes, it said this piece is dedicated in memoriam of the Polish composer
Ludoslavsky,
who died partway through its composition, but not from it. Died. I was listening to it when he died. No, it just happened to. He just happened to pass away before it was completed.
Yeah. Now, it's pretty interesting though, because Lindberg himself was kind of coming out of a period of non-productivity. He had gotten some tropical disease, and it stopped him from composing for 18 months around the year 1986. And he had reached some sort of a dead end in his music, and this was one of the works that came after he resumed composing. The notes in the booklet say that it's a synthesis of his 1990s output. It was composed in 1993 to 1994, so imagine he wrote a lot more music in the 1990s. So I don't see how that's the case. And I want to say, first of all, this is a miraculous engineering and conducting job on this particular work, because this is a huge orchestra with a lot of different sounds, and all of them are clear. It's amazing. Maybe it's also the orchestration as well. You hear every detail in this. It's it's an amazing sort of performance, recording, and possibly orchestration as well. I was really impressed by that right away. I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff coming at you in this. Okay, another interesting thing about this piece before I talk about the music is it was a commission from Suntory Limited in Japan.
Oh, right.
So the first orchestra, it was premiered in Tokyo by the Tokyo Symphony Orchestra under Kazufumi Yamashita at Suntory Hall in June 1994. So a work written for a Japanese orchestra. How about that? Here we are. They must have been quite an orchestra too, because this is must have had a lot of discipline. This sounds like a really difficult piece to pull off. All right, it starts with some familiar Magnus Lindberg sounds that stretch the sound of the orchestra. We get those low reeds, and this is one of my favorite sounds in the orchestra, the low reed sound. We get the really vibrating reed sort of. I just love that. I don't know. You hear it in a lot of early 20th century music, the beginning of the Rite of Spring, things like that. Also, sul ponticello on the strings, so you get that really ghostly sort of string sound that they get from playing on the bridge. And then it just kind of blooms eventually into this full orchestral sound, but often sort of contrasting with each other. It's odd. The harmony is very modern. It's very contemporary, let's say. It's of our time. But the way that the composer sort of will have like these full orchestral sections juxtaposed with, like, say, sections of the orchestra who get to play, make this sound, first of all, like a bit like a concerto for orchestra, which Ludoslavsky also wrote. By the way, he wrote a concerto for orchestra, as did Bartók. Bartók wrote the really famous one. But it also reminded me, just that technique reminded me of the concerto grosso from the Baroque era. Now, this doesn't sound anything like a concerto grosso, because that had its motor rhythms, and it kept going back to it's the same theme when the tutti came, when the whole orchestra played. That's not the case here. But just the whole way of sort of organizing the music like that kind of gave me something from the past to sort of hold on to as it all went by. This is a very complicated score, as I said. I also have a note here: beautifully realized recording with percussive chimes, especially registering in feel-good places in your body. Okay, I got this really, it's a nice feeling from the chimes in the first movement. Okay. I really do enjoy when the full orchestra kind of dissipates and you're left with like a section, sort of like a chamber group playing. And you're in the midst of this big orchestra. It's kind of it's almost like it's zeroing in on a group, just like a concerto for orchestra would. But this shouldn't be thought of as a concerto for orchestra, because it's not really giving the orchestra players a chance to like show their ability. Really, it's more, everything is aimed at the the music. All the aims in this score are musical. They're not aimed at anybody getting a chance to show off or show their ability. Okay, so contrast is the name of the game there. Okay, we move into the second movement, which I didn't really write anything about, which is the slow movement. and also very long. Okay, and sort of calm, I would say. Then the third movement is a sort of a scherzo, and it has this kind of musical. I thought of it as like a musical tornado. It kind of sounded like it was just this giant like momentum starting, and we often within that we hear a lot of themes or elements of the score that we've heard in the previous two movements. I kind of thought about the image it gave me when I first heard this was The Wizard of Oz, the tornado of The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy looks out the window and she sees like the house and the cows and in the tornado, except that you're in this tornado and you're hearing all these themes pass by that you've already heard in the previous two movements. And then it draws to this big climax, and the last movement is sort of an epilogue to that. It has a lot of rushing strings, culminating in the calm chords at the end. I really liked this work a lot. It's not a difficult listen, but it's enough that you're going to have to pay attention to it. No worries there; it'll grab your attention. It's too loud for you not to pay attention to. But if you really want to get into some contemporary music, you should really give this a listen. I thought it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said contrast was the word I put in my notes on this one too. Yeah, I enjoyed what I liked about it is the different timbres and textures.
Yeah, me too.
The way he plays off individual instruments and then whole sections, and then the contrasts in the passages is interesting. You go from quiet strings to suddenly huge percussion, and then interesting brass combinations and different kinds of things. It is kind of garish in some places. It sort of reminds you of some sort of weird extraterrestrial landscape or something like that. But it is interesting.
The audience must be reminded that the composer is still alive, so that's why we have those.
If you're up for something different and you're going to enjoy just tones and textures and things, this has a lot of interesting coloring, sort of like a free form painting. I shouldn't say free form; it's obviously well thought out and like that, but when you experience it for the first time and you don't know what's coming next, you're going to be on like this roller coaster ride of different sort of sound colors and things through it. So it is very entertaining in that way.
Yeah, listen to the wonderful timbres and pay attention to the contrasts, just in loud, soft, in large orchestra, small orchestra, in the rhythm changes. This is all about contrast to me. Anyway, that's what I would say about that. And it's very, it's just what I love about classical music, as it's very contemporary. It's very much him, and no one else writes music like this. Lindberg really is an original, and yet it's tied to the past as well. We kind of, hear these echoes. It sort of fits into the whole sort of tradition of classical music. So it's got all these like really appealing qualities to me. I liked it a lot. It's a gigantic work too. It's like 40 minutes long. And yeah, anyway, there you go. There are two more works on this album, and they're both, as far as I know, unrecorded until now. And they were both shorter one-movement works. So that's Aura is the major work on this recording. The second work, a one-movement, 16-minute work, is called Related Rocks. And this is, interestingly enough, for two pianos and percussion, and we immediately think of Bartók when you hear that, but this doesn't sound anything like the Bartók work. Okay, I mentioned Bartók because of his concerto for orchestra as well, and Aura kind of has like that quality to it, but doesn't sound anything like that. This particular work doesn't sound anything like Bartók. The percussion is much more extensive. In fact, in the Bartók's very famous sonata, for two pianos and percussion, sonata for two pianos and percussion, the pianos have the majority of the material. The percussion is just there for little colors, and they don't really play a huge role. But here they do in Lindberg's work. Okay. there are a lot of percussion instruments. There are also electronics on this, and the electronic part was developed at IRCAM, which is in Paris. And in England, what's nice about this, IRCAM means Institut de Recherche et Coordination Acoustique Musique. Interestingly, that translates into English also with the initials IRCAM, which how convenient. Institute for the Research and Coordination in Acoustics/Music. That works out really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about that? Okay. Now, the software that was used for the electronic part can morph one sound into another. And he's able to melt one sound into another. It's like a bell sound could melt into like this huge string orchestra sound. And one of the fun things about listening to this piece is like identifying those elements when that's happening, when that metamorphosis of sound is occurring in the electronics. The electronic sounds are pretty interesting. They have this kind of like silkiness to them, like this sort of like a shiny alien metal quality to them, something that would kind of blast through the universe and come to Earth without burning up, kind of feeling. I get the impression that all those UFOs they're talking about now. I mean, maybe they'd make a sound like this. I think if you were to approach them. So keep that a listen for you UFO aficionados out there.
Your space alloy hat is required to listen to this one. Yeah.
Okay.
This one is this is actually easy to listen to because it's quite rhythmic. Yeah. So the pulse will drive you through it when you listen to this one.
Yeah, rhythm kind of, especially in 21st century now, music is really the element that's kind of driving. So there's more of a, Stravinsky kind of was the proponent of that in his music. It was all about the rhythmic propulsion, as it is in jazz and rock and roll as well. Rhythm really kind of is what attracts us. So when you have a classical work like this, you really know you're in the 20th or 21st century when you're hearing it. In this case, you would be in the 20th century. This was composed in 1997. By the way, the three works on this disc are all live recordings. You would never know it, though. No, it's a pretty impressive achievement as far as the sound goes. Sound and especially considering the work Aura and the complicated textures in that, and everything is just so clean. It's such a great recording. This must have been some concert to be at. I wish I was there. By the way, related rocks, the title comes from a geological exhibit that Lindberg saw when he was composing the piece. And he kind of liked the different textures of the rocks, and I think he kind of related that to what he was doing. It should be mentioned that he was already composing the work when he came up with the title. He didn't think of rocks first and then compose the work. So it's not about related rocks. He's just sort of using that as a metaphor for what he's trying to do here. So think about it that way. Don't think about it as, rocks. Okay. They make the sound of things very cool. Okay. Yeah, I enjoyed the electronics of this. I thought it was pretty inventive. The last piece, Marea, which means Marea. It's actually Italian. I just the French R there. It's for me Marea. It means tide, the tide. In Italian. And this is another one that was he was writing this piece, and it he didn't have a title for it, and then he let's see, what exactly did he do? The ebbing and flowing wasn't associated with... This piece has a lot of like ebbing and flowing of textures in it. It wasn't associated with anything water-like when he was doing it, but he later realized that the tide would be a good metaphor for the work. I think he was in England looking at the English Channel, or maybe France looking at the English Channel when he came up with the title. Okay, so it doesn't really have... It's not really about the tides, but the whole ebbing, flowing quality of the music, and he's using that, the tide, as a metaphor for what's happening in the music. Again, it's a little intellectual work you got to do there to put this together. All right. Anyway, this one is... I read the notes for this. It says that the work is based on the chaconne principle. All right. Now, a chaconne, again, from the Baroque era. Now, I mentioned this again in the piece Aura. I said it reminded me of like concerto grosso approach, even though it doesn't sound anything like a concerto grosso. Chaconne is really a Baroque form, and it's a repeating bass line. You'll have this bass pattern, and it'll keep repeating throughout the work. And above that, you have just these almost kaleidoscopic display of different melodies, textures, chords, whatever you're going to put over that. Okay, so you can kind of think about it as the chaconne is like the crust on the pie that you're making, and then the pie could be like whatever you want it to be, you know. So it's that's what a chaconne is like. Now, this particular chaconne is built on 12 tone chords, so I couldn't identify the bass line. It's like a 12 note chromatic sort of theme. Yes. I couldn't work it out what it was, because what you want to. The thing is, when you hear the word chaconne, you can listen to it and say, oh, here's the chaconne theme in the bass, but you don't need to. The composer is telling you that it's there, so you just assume it's there and listen to what's on top of it, knowing intellectually that it's being held together by this repeating bass line. That's what I was kind of required to do here when I heard this piece, because I couldn't figure out the 12-tone bass line. The 12-tone bass line, or where it was. It's not really outlined or anything like that. But, we'll take the composer's word for it that it's there. I heard this piece twice, and maybe later I'll figure it out, and I'll say, there it is, and I'll have no one to talk to about it. Okay, anyway, this is a very nice performance. The layers of sound are all clearly audible. Again, a fantastic recording and performance. Okay, all thematic material is clearly shaped so it stands out from the massive instruments, even though this is scored for a symphony. This is composed for a sinfonietta-sized orchestra, a little smaller than a symphony orchestra, but it still sounds huge to me. I think the way the sound is all layered together. I thought this was a big orchestra when I heard it, and then I read about it. I said, it's a smaller orchestra. A sinfonietta, it just wouldn't be these masses of strings, basically, is what it would come down to. I was just this. I like the pretty ending this piece had. It kind of goes into this sort of like static sort of state, and then the piano and these kind of reedy wind instruments end the piece in this really interesting timbre. This whole recording, all of these works have these really interesting timbres to them, and I found it pretty exciting to listen to. Great engineering. This is music that could easily sound like Chaos in lesser hands. The Finnish Radio Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Hannu Lintu, do a superb job. Go for it. Give this a listen. I think you'll enjoy it, and you can tell your friends that you're listening to this contemporary composer, and they won't know it. They'll think they'll kind of give you a few steps, and they'll take a few steps back and think you're amazing for knowing
they'll
this
just
stuff.
Leave you alone, which is just as good.
They'll leave you alone, which is kind of what I want these days.
These days,
yeah,
we've been talking about those kind of interactions with strange people. Yeah, I don't know. For me, this work is, the Marea is a bit dense and a little dark.
It's dense dark. It's got that 12-tone thing going, too.
The overall mood of his compositions, to me, is still kind of garish and a little bit unsettling. But yet I'm drawn in.
It's not relaxing. Certainly not.
I am drawn in by the tonal qualities to it. Right. So, it sort of satisfies. I heard that cork pop there.
Yeah.
It satisfies my.
Now you can hear it pour too. I have a great microphone here. Here we go.
It satisfies my sort of taste for different colors, and it's interesting. But there's also a huge spectrum in frequency on this too. I started out. I actually have an aversion to headphones. I don't like to listen on headphones unless absolutely necessary. I have two sound systems, and they're both pretty good. The smaller one excels sort of in, how should I say, sort of sweetness of sound, and then the larger one gives me the full tonal spectrum. So I started this at my desk with the smaller system, because I was going to sit there and type my listening notes with it. But right from the beginning of Aura, it starts with such low frequencies that these speakers weren't quite up to the full spectrum. So I had to come back and listen again, with my big speakers, because there's a full spectrum of sounds and dynamics going on here. So, you could probably catch that with a good set of headphones, but I really need for me, I'm a speaker guy. So this one, you definitely want to have your best speakers or headphones ready to go to catch the full, because there's a really wide spectrum of sound going on here that you need to hear.
Yeah, I got to say, Japanese houses really aren't made for contemporary music, because the sound tends to leak into the neighboring houses. It's really not all that much.
Luckily for me, my neighbors are of an advanced age. I don't think they can hear much anymore. So
that's not a bad thing. That'll be us soon enough, boy. Let's hope not. Anyway, I kind of hope I keep my hearing to the end.
I get the UV meters on the Luxman right up there, and they've never complained. But I don't know if they're all alive anymore. I guess they're still around, those neighbors.
Well, maybe they like music, and that's always good. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. As an aside, you usually don't hear about complaints from neighbors over classical music. You know, it's usually that someone who listens to that kind of music.
My favorite one.
Yeah. Adult music doesn't usually tend to annoy the neighbors as much, you know. So.
I think it kind of intimidates them. They're like kind of afraid they'll look ignorant if they complain or something. You know, they just won't come over and do that. Although Japanese people, I don't think they really care. They they just see it as something foreign. They do like Western music, though.
Oh, yeah, they like it.
Yeah, they're big fans of like classical music. A lot of people play the piano here. It's like
yeah. Sometimes, you know, when the weather is nice, I have the windows open and I'm working up here. I put on, if I've got something more breezy and easy, I play it, and I'm sure that the neighbors can get a whiff of it, and they seem okay with it. So
I have this theory that because if Western civilization falls, which it's looking more and more like can happen any day, it'll be like when ancient Rome fell and all those Greek texts of the Arab countries in North Africa and stuff, or the Middle East at the time, preserved all these Greek writings and stuff, and then finally Europe got them back during the Renaissance. If that ever happens today in Europe, if we ever lose all of this wonderful culture that we have, I think Japan and Korea will preserve them for us, because they're really big fans of it.
We'll have the greater physical collections of classical and jazz music that we can come back to. Just looking at people I know who have big collections, and then what's available in the used stores. So, if all of this streaming goes down and there's nothing left, just come to Japan. You can get all these. You can get everything on CD again. It's all still here.
I think a lot of collectors wind up going to now with the internet, you can kind of do this easily too. It's like they'll go to like Japanese shops to look for rarities. They often have them here. Somehow all these like rare things are wound up in Japan. Because Japanese, like me, are great collectors. Okay, they like to collect things.
And a lot of the Japanese editions of things were produced with more care and attention, so they sound better. And I have a lot of them. Yeah, especially like Japan EMI releases that were done in the 90s. They had some really great engineers and guys who worked on the remastering of things, and they sound so much better than the things that were just slapped onto disc and thrown out in the States. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, they also know that they sound better, so they are also more expensive.
Sometimes they are. Yeah, but I've gotten a lot of them for just a few hundred yen. It's a couple dollars, and they're out there. So.
Oh, you got used ones then?
Yeah, used ones.
That's good. For sure. Yeah. All right.
So
okay. There we go. It's been a happy week for me in classical music, I have to say.
Interesting combination of stuff.
It all made me...
time periods covered.
Me up to, I was intrigued. It felt good.
So onto jazz this week. The theme is sax. Can never get enough sax.
We all need more sax.
You need some sax.
Sax is good for you. Before we start this, I want to say something. In the middle of the week, Russ and I were talking about possible titles for this episode, and we had the 3 sax recordings. We came up with a load of like sax/sex jokes, okay? Because, just put the word sax in where you would put sex. We came up with about 6 or 7 of them, and I just want to tell the audience right now, we intend to use every one of them eventually. They're all going into a file. So if you think we're childish, you are correct. We are going to use all of these titles eventually.
Well, you may think we're childish, but when we put provocative titles, they get more downloads. Whether people actually listen through to the end of the episode or not, I have no idea. We have measuring that sort of metric, but what was our get a sax pack with our Renaissance workout?
Yeah,
that was one of the more downloaded
but that one was
episodes.
Pretty ornate, I have to say. Yeah,
it was good. So this one will be
because we said the word Renaissance workout is like a sexual thing in the episode. I remember. Yeah.
So you can expect a similar sort of reference with this title, whichever one we decide on.
Yeah, we haven't decided on which one to use yet, but oh boy, it's just a cornucopia of bad puns this week. You're gonna love it.
Anyway,
whatever we come up with.
All of the sax that we'll be having this week will be of the tenor variety.
There you go.
Yeah. Which hey.
And I just had a really long sax session this week, as I heard all 3 of these albums like one after the other on the same day. Right. And I have to say, it was really interesting. An interesting kind of contrast between the sounds of these 3 players.
That's
I really
right.
enjoyed that.
There's a lot of variety here, and 2 of the recordings are live recordings. And let's see. I'm gonna put the live ones as the sandwich bread here, and we'll put the studio one in the middle. And so we'll start off with Straight Off, which is by Martin Jacobsen on the Steeplechase label. And Martin Jacobsen is a Danish-born tenor saxophonist who has been based in Paris since about 1995, but he tours a lot, and he divides his time a lot in Italy and also Asia in recent years. He's, from what I can gather, mainly self-taught, but to a very high level of proficiency. And this Straight Off, as the title, is sort of descriptive of the kind of jazz we have here, which is very much straight ahead jazz. And he's got a kind of international group of players with him. On piano, Hiroshi Murayama from Japan. And I'm not sure quite how to say this name. Is it Gilles Naturel on bass?
I guess it would be Giles if it's Giles. Giles.
Double L, though. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not
Gilles,
sure.
maybe. Is he French?
Gilles Naturel, maybe a Frenchman. On bass, okay. Mark Taylor, that's a very Anglophone type of name, on drums. And this recording comes on the heels with the same personnel, I believe, of a live recording in Japan, but this one was recorded in France. He seems to have a backlog of these live recordings. Very good sonics on this for a live recording. Sounds, just as good as a studio recording, in my opinion. The sound quality is really good. And we've got mostly a kind of straight ahead selection of tunes, beginning with standard How Little We Know. And this one is a breezy standard, nice rhythm section opening, and Jacobsen comes in on the melody, and you get a taste of his tone, which is a very shiny and rich tenor tone. It's a pleasing tone he gets on the sax. The groove changes to a harder swing when his solo kicks in, and he bounces along really nicely through several choruses, which is one of the highlights of this album. As a live date, the players get to really stretch out here. There's no time constraints on the playing, and so the solos get really developed here. And you get a sense that he's a really good swing player here as he bounces through several choruses really nicely. And then we get Murayama coming in with a piano solo, and this is he really punctuates his solo with chord stabs here, and he really has a long time to build a great solo over a lot of choruses. And as comes up through this recording, Murayama is one of the players who likes to throw in quotations, and jazz fans will know what this is. But if you're not listener of jazz frequently, one thing that some jazz players will do is they will quote bits of a melody from another song and insert it into another song when there's a similar chord progression, cadence, or they'll make it fit just when they think the time is appropriate. And Murayama does this throughout the recording, and in here he inserts a little bit of the melody of the tune If You Could See Me Now. And you get a
very
sense
intellectually satisfying when you're able to identify the tunes, by the way.
Yeah, I got all of them on the first try, and one was just sticking in my mind. I couldn't think of what it was, but it came to me on further listening. And he has a really staccato kind of left hand that stands out, but it helps add the excitement. The next tune is called Headway. This is a minor blues that has some interesting chords and a stop time behind the melody. And Murayama on piano takes the first solo. He keeps it really bluesy and relaxed at the start, and then he adds some interesting rhythms and two-hand figures, and then he gets kind of funky with a kind of Bobby Timmons-like trills, if you know Bobby Timmons' style, and a crashing end. It's a really great solo. And then the piano and drums drop out for a bit when Jacobsen starts his solo softly, and he builds it up as the piano and drums come back in, and add some kind of false fingering for fun as he goes through a lot of creative variations over many, many choruses. And there's a shorter bass solo with some light drum fills in between, and then back to the melody. Third track, another jazz standard here, Polka Dots and Moonbeams, gets the typical slow ballad treatment. And Jacobsen shows a nice warm lower register on the melody here. Very nice phrasing in his solo. He leaves a lot of space between his lines, which is nice. And then Murayama comes in with a solo, a lot of simple melodic lines here in the first part of his solo. And then you'll notice here his rhythmic style is to play slightly behind the beat, which is really stands out here. And then he adds some real Bill Evans style figures near the end. Anyone who listens to Bill Evans, you'll pick up on these. He lifts them really directly here, almost as an ode to him. And when the melody comes back in on the bridge, the drums switch to a samba beat, which is kind of interesting, and until the verse comes around, and then it's back to the slow swing. And Jacobsen takes kind of a gentle sax cadenza at the end to finish things off. On track 4, we've got Groovy Samba, which is a Cannonball Adderley composition from his album Cannonball's Bossa Nova. And Jacobsen reworks the melody a bit. It's still identifiable, but he's customized it a bit. His solo is really rhythmic over the bossa rhythms section. And then Murayama's piano solo introduces some really nice clear hand, right hand staccato notes that are mixed into his fluid lines. And then he adds some really cool Latiny two-handed lines, bluesy figures, and then some rhythmic hammering. It's a really inventive and fun piano solo on here. And yeah, I really came to enjoy this Murayama's piano playing. I had never heard of him before, but he's really distinctive and an excellent player.
Yeah, I thought so too, by the way. I just wanted to put that in there. He grabbed my ear. Yeah. There's a lot of great grooves on this record too. Mm-hmm. They're kind of, not necessarily funky, but it's highly rhythmic playing, and it affects the shaping of the melodies and the playing and stuff. It made it really enjoyable for me. Okay.
Yeah, and it's alive. It's great, great energy. The next tune, West Coast Blues, and this is a Wes Montgomery tune, really swinging tune that has some interesting chord changes in it. Murayama takes the first solo on piano here. He swings nicely in mixing in a lot of high register lines and bluesy figures, builds a nice climax with some percussive chord figures. And Jacobsen comes in. He starts out really smoothly, builds it gradually, and he gets some nice double time lines in. He takes a lot of choruses, but he never runs out of ideas, and he connects it smoothly right back to the melody. A really good development, showing a mature soloing sense. Then we get the title track, which is Straight Off. It's a swinging minor tune. It sounds sort of like a Coltrane tune. I'm not sure if it's original or not. There's not really any notes available here. Jacobsen takes the melody into a solo. Then he really surfs the wandering changes, coming up with lots of creative phrases through here. Then Murayama comes in. He's got a really intense hard bop solo, lots of cascades, and he throws in another quote from the standard "If I Should Lose You." He fits that in there, and then the piano and sax trade phrases before returning to the melody. After that, a tune called Nightfall. It's another slow ballad, and here Jacobsen shows a more smooth upper register on the melody, and a really smooth cello. And Murayama adds a kind of tasty, delicate solo on this one too. And there's a kind of extended chord ending here for Jacobsen to add some final improvisations over. And the final tune is called The End of a Love Affair, which has been recorded by a lot of vocalists over the years. This starts off with a drum lead-in, and then it's off to a really fast swing. And Jacobsen is off to a furious pace from the solo break with lots of double-time figures. There's lots of choruses here, and he's really digging into the low register too, showing a little bit a different style. And Murayama comes in, and he keeps up the pace with a lot of fast lines in his solo and rhythms that drive things along. And here he throws in a couple quotes from Fascinating Rhythm. And he gets those in with the key change too that he works into that too. And then Jacobsen comes back in to trade phrases with the drums before heading back to the melody. So, as the title hints at, this is a recording of straight-ahead jazz with not too many surprises in content, but the sound quality is excellent for a live recording, and the nice feature is there's a lot of room for solos. These guys take a lot of choruses that you're not going to get on a studio date, and then that allows them to show what they can do as far as, not just improvising, but developing an arc of composing something in their solos. And it really shows off not only, Jacobsen's facility, maturity as an improviser, but Murayama really shines here too. And really excellent playing overall, and really well stylized and exciting performance. So really nice live recording by the Danish.
Yeah, this was my favorite of the three jazz albums this way. I just like the whole lively playing, the just the whole rhythmic strength of it. It just kind of it was really uplifting and kind of. Yeah, this was the second one I heard, by the way, because I listened to, as I said, I listened to them all in order, and I heard them more than once too, but the first time, and this one really picked me up. I was struck by his sound, not the breathy sound we were talking about last week, but a really, really pretty.
It's a rich, warm, kind of glowing sound.
Glowing is a good word. Yeah, I like that.
There's something swinging in Denmark. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but
those Danish guys. I don't see. I don't know. Maybe I was thinking Lindberg was Danish because I just wanted to, because I like what the Danes do. But I like Finnish. I like Finnish composers a lot too. So there you go. I don't know much about Finnish jazz though. I wonder if there's any.
I don't know. Yeah, but there's a lot of good Danish stuff. Jeez, we've been getting a lot of it.
Well, let's not get confused. We're in Danish now. Yeah, Danish mode
sounds
now.
good on my Dolly speakers for sure.
Yeah. Oh, Dolly speakers. I'm going to get a pair of those.
You should get some. I got 2 pairs.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will. Bother the neighbors. Maybe they'll just kind of really be happy because it'll be such good sound,
Okay, everyone will love you,
Yeah.
All
right. What do you got next there?
Second, we've got A Happy Destination. That's the title. By Rich Perry on the Steeplechase label. And another tenor saxophonist, a native of Ohio, but he's been living and performing in New York City since the mid-'70s. He's a former member of the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, one of the greater jazz groups, big band. And that band's kind of morphed into something in a modern day, I think, called the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, which he's still a key member of. And they still play at the Village Vanguard in New York. And they tour. Over the years, Perry's also played with a lot of other big figures in jazz, including Chet Baker, Paul Bley, Lee Konitz, Rufus Reed, George Mraz, Billy Hart, and others. He's recorded 23 albums as a leader, and this is his second album of all originally composed tunes. However, his compositions, they have a really generally improvisational character. So it's a bit of a struggle to describe his tunes and what's going on here, although they're kind of interesting if you're into a more freer jazz element. So on this date, we've got Rich Perry on tenor sax, Gary Versace on piano, Jay Anderson on bass, and John Riley on drums. The first tune is called Iron Buddha Part 1.
That kind of made me think of Iron Butterfly for some reason.
There's an
Iron Buddha
title.
too. It's kind of you got that spiritual element in there. It just sounded kind of hard. I don't know. And in fact, it had kind of like a hard kind of rhythm to it. It's kind of.
These are really hard for me to describe what you hear here, because it's
it is. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
also, part 1, by the way, Iron Buddha Part 1. This is more.
I'll do my best, but this is kind of a very free, swinging, modern, mysterious, chromatic melody, but on everything. And here as well, Perry shows that he has a very fluid tone. The piano comes in after his statement with some complex rhythmic and harmonic figures in a solo that then fades into a bass solo, and that fades again in the drums pick up the beat again, and Perry's back with the kind of melody statement. So this is a very kind of structured opening tune. The second tune here is called Everything Hurts. It's an interesting title again. This is a funky beat tune. It's got a real bluesy feel. Perry takes the first solo and he plays around with the melody figure rhythmically, and he mixes kind of bluesy ideas with reaching phrases. The piano solo that follows is percussive and rhythmic, and it settles into the groove that the drums and bass are doing, and explores some more harmonic ideas also outside of the chords with funky phrases. Number
nothing
3.
painful about that track.
No, it's
really enjoyable.
More the rhythmic one. Recoleta, and this is kind of a slow minor lament. It's got a slinky melody to a Latin beat, and Perry plays relaxed with a lyrical tone, and he really explores the melancholy possibilities implied in the melody here. Versace's piano solo is really pensive and a bit more rhythmic. And it seems like there's a dialogue going on here. The sax is longing for something, and I felt like the piano is like explaining to the sax why that just can't be. You may want this, but no, you can't have it. And then the sax comes back to return that longing kind of melody. Kind of interesting emotions I picked up from this one. 4 is called Luft, L-U-F-T. This has some light cymbals and bass harmonics that start out in a mysterious way. The sax comes in with a very bendy descending line, and the piano adds tinkles behind it. A beat finally appears, and then the piano solos sparsely, recalling the descending line and kind of embellishing on it. Then Perry comes back in on sax for some slow exploration with his warm tone.
This one really stood out for me for its oddness, by the way.
Very odd, yes. Yeah.
It was a complete change of tempo and feel and everything. It is kind of Luft means like air, and it is kind of airy.
Yeah, it's airy.
Yeah.
And 5 is Rebellion Dogs, D-A-W-G-S. Yeah. And this is a medium swing to a very free-form melody, and Perry takes it into a solo right away. He's more aggressive here. There's faster lines and harmonic ventures. The piano picks up on his final solo idea and uses it to create this kind of undulating improvisation in both hands. And then the sax comes back in and trades chromatic lines with the piano. This followed by Iron Buddha Part 2. And,
we were waiting for this.
Yeah. So as part 1, part 2 comes here. It's got a mysterious piano opening, and then the sax joins in for some phrases with the bass is in a kind of free rhythm. Then the bass takes over and explores for a while before the sax comes back in. And then there's more of a free-form exploration from the piano. And finally, the sax comes in for another last melody statement. 7, for our vegan friends, this is called plant-based. It's a slow, rocky beat with a kind of pentatonic melody figure that sets the groove here. Perry takes it in the lower register for some honks here, and then he launches into some real harmonic explorations. And then the piano adds a lot of like rhythmic jabs and things before a solo that starts with some syncopated phrases, and then he ties it together into long runs and turns out some really kind of hypnotic two-handed figures. Then Perry comes back and builds tension with some intense phrases, and then things slow and mellow again, and Perry kind of decides on some low tones with harmonics for the ending.
I think there's some pork hidden in that work, though. It's called plant-based, but they snuck some meat in there.
Could be some pork, yeah. Maybe some Slim Jims chopped up in there. I don't know. If that's really meat, I don't know.
Oh, my God. What is that?
Then 8 is called Happy Destination, or Destiny, Part 1. This starts out with some kind of tinkling percussion behind a really happy kind of free-flowing sax motif. It's got a happy kind of, major character to it. And the piano comes in with some rolling figures, kind of like a streaming water. That's what I sort of thought. But then the stream sort of dries up into a drip, and then the bass kind of meanders from there. Then the piano comes in with a real development of a solo, and then Perry comes back to explore things some more. And that leads into Happy Destiny Part 2. And this one has a more steady beat with some interesting accents on this version of it. And Perry states the melody more assertively before the piano explores around it harmonically. And then we get more free solo from Perry, and he finds some really pretty notes, and also he plays some kind of harmonics on the more strident phrases, and then he brings it to a quiet close. And then we get maybe the most kind of standard sounding of the compositions, which is called Long Dark Spring. Mm-hmm. And this one starts with a repeating sequence of piano figures that get developed more and more on each repeat. And then Perry joins in with a very mournful melody, and he gets some more harmonics on the sax in some places. And the piano takes over for a while before Perry is back with the sad melody kind of to close it out. So you get the feeling on these, rather than compositions, they're sort of free compositional ideas that are a base for exploration on this set. And, if you're into more standard jazz, this might not be to your liking, but if you want to escape sort of jazz conventions of, standard tunes and cliches that often come up in improvising, this is a pretty fresh kind of sound that will take you into exploration here. Perry has this very sweet lyrical sound, but put with this kind of open and challenging material. It's sort of a nice balance, because he always sounds really, even pretty, I would say, is the sound that he has of tone, and the way he phrases connects things well. Versace seems to be a good pianist for this kind of work, because he seems to be comfortable in these sort of open structures, and yet he brings some interesting, new kinds of phrasing and connections in that. So I was interested. It's something. It's not really free jazz. It's based on all of these ideas, but it does explore a lot and go out of the normal kind of realm. It could be a happy destination for you.
Yeah, it's not challenging as much as it's like unusual. It's sort of something a little different. That's always a good thing. I feel like you know, if you get something that's a little different than what you normally hear, it's good for your brain. I actually found this enjoyable though. 'Cause I think his playing makes it all work. It's appealing enough, you know, that you're kind of like, you know, sold on, you know, what's happening here. It's just different than what I'm used to. I did like it though.
Yeah, if you can if you're in the mood to focus, you'll definitely be able to follow what he's doing. You know, there are he states sort of you get the idea of where the composition is coming from, what it's the idea that it's based on is stated, and then it's developed upon, and you know the other players add to it. So yeah, it's not that far out there, and I think it's really enjoyable, creative and original kind of thing. It doesn't sound like anything else really. It's doing something new with these ideas. So
basically, if you listen to this in Lindberg in the same day, I mean, you might become a Buddha or something, you know.
Yeah, an iron one. Yeah, just stay out of the way so you don't rust. Yeah. Don't get rusty on your Buddha.
You won't walk away the same person that you came in as, you know.
And then, another completely different Saxual experience for the last recording. We've got a recording called Straight Gonz, and this is on the AMM label with the Modern Jazz Trio. So this is featuring the American saxophonist Jerry Bergonzi.
Well, a name that's familiar, really.
Yeah, who has a long lineage going back almost 50 years ago with the Dave Brubeck Quartet.
What different days those were.
Yeah. And, you know, he's played around the world since then. And, you know, basically, if you want to take a sax player who can go back to Coltrane to modern times and has been through all of the things there, Bergonzi is high on the list. And he's recorded on different labels, including Blue Note and Atlantic Records. And now, you know, he's getting up there. He's 72 years old. However, his passion and oomph has not diminished at all. He sounds really energetic and forceful here, and he rejoins the Modern Jazz Trio here, their sixth album together. And the Modern Jazz Trio is a Danish supergroup, more Danish. We keep getting all these going back to Danish things here.
Yeah, what's going on there in Denmark anyway? There's some good speakers, good music coming out of there. There's even good classical music coming out of Denmark as well.
Yeah. So this group has toured a lot internationally in collaboration with other great artists, including another great saxophone, Dave Liebman, trumpeter Tim Hagens, George Garzone, and they've also captured their last live at the Dexter Jazz Club, and that also has some Bergonzi on it, and some other tunes here. Now, this recording on the notes is, it's not specified where the date is of the recording is, so I don't know. But so it's Bergonzi on tenor sax, and the Modern Jazz Trio is Carl Winter on piano, Johnny Amann on bass, and Anders Mogensen on drums. And it's a short recording, really. There's only 6 tracks, and some of the tunes are rather short, but it's very spicy and satisfying in the material. So it begins with a Bergonzi original called I See You. And this is a relaxed swing tune, and right away you'll get a taste, if you don't know Bergonzi's playing. This is a tone that's very different from the 2 previous saxophone players. He's got a huge, big, and edgy sound. Here he plays the melody and then improvises a bit before coming right back to the melody. And this is just a short opener tune that's a sax feature. It's all sax, and it's over almost as soon as it starts. And that goes into track 2, which is called Extra Extra. That's XTRA twice. And if you wonder what that means, if you can count, you'll figure it out right away, because this is a blues with interesting harmonies. But if you know the blues form, the standard blues is 12 bars. But when you listen to this, you're going to hear 14 bars instead of 12, hence extra twice. That's the 2 extra measures of music here. And so Bergonzi comes in and then he solos really hard and bluesy. He's really on fire for 72 years old. He's really playing it out there. And then here we're going to get a taste of this modern jazz trio, especially the pianist Winter. This guy's a really excellent pianist. He takes a well-punctuated solo. There's some really forceful left-hand accompaniment, some right-hand rolling in the solo, and he's really digging in here. Bergonzi comes back in for the head. This is another short one, but they leave some crowd noise, and there's some enthusiastic shouting on the fade-out, so you can tell the crowd was really into this. Then we get a couple of standards coming up next. We've got All of You, Cole Porter tune. The sax intro is really biting, but kind of a cool tone here. His articulation on the tone in the melody is really unique. He goes from biting to like contrasting breathy runs in his playing. And then Winter comes in with another rhythmic solo, really agile running lines. And as the piano solo gets going, the drums really work up this huge backbeat, driving him along on here. You know, it's a Cole Porter tune, but they're really pounding it out. And Bergonzi comes back in for a solo. He gets some upper register exploration here, and he goes down low too. He's firing off all these rapid phrases, and then some of the figures in there are kind of like Pharoah Sandor-esque kind of figures in here. And then the tune mellows out for a bass solo, and then Bergonzi comes back for the melody, and he gets intense again, and then he ends it kind of mellow, and as we heard in the last recording, kind of quotations, he just hints at the melody of "It Might As Well Be Spring" here, and then brings the tune to a close. Followed by another standard, Body and Soul by Johnny Green. It gets the slow ballad treatment as usual here, and Bergonzi plays the melody, and he shows here some kind of upper register Coltrane-like tones in here, and then we get a Winter piano solo showing a really nice command of touch. You get a sense, you know, some pianists just have that sense of touch that, you know, communicates something different. And Winter has it here, also with a nice relaxed swing. Bergonzi comes in with a solo. It's got some interesting harmonic figures, just enough space between what he's doing and some really tart articulation. And then Amand takes a relaxed bass solo before they return to the melody. And then at the end, Bergonzi takes a cadenza and he explores the harmony, and he finds some further new ideas to finish this one out nicely. And then we go to two Bergonzi originals. 5 is called Ayaz. The drums get this one going, building on the tension until the piano comes in. And this is a very Coltrane-esque kind of tune. The piano comes in establishing the kind of modal pattern in a Coltrane kind of thing. And Bergonzi comes in and he really honks out on the syncopated melody on top of that. And then the other thing that's nice about this tune, it has that exciting switch between straight beat and swinging sections that, you know, started in like the hard bop kind of era with Art Blakey.
I wish we were on video because Russ is now demonstrating what that would look like if the drummer was were doing it.
It's just that switch when one of these tunes goes from the and it hits that swing, and then it's you feel like something breaks loose, and so you get that kind of here, and then he continues kind of into an intense solo. And it explores the tensions, implied in the contrasting moods. Then the piano drops out kind of midway in Bergonzi's solo, and then he's really flying free. So like he can do whatever he wants harmonically, and he's got that biting tone. It's really perfect for this style. That kind of aggressive playing. And then the piano comes back and for a solo, and he keeps the energy that Bergonzi had in his sax solo here. Lots of fast lines over the modes, really percussive left-hand chords. And then Bergonzi comes back in. He's still really wound up, and he adds some cool squawks. And then, if you know Coltrane's Love Supreme, he implies some of those kind of phrases here, and you'll hear that. And then the crowd really loves it. You'll hear them, in the background here. The drums take a short solo, and the piano comes back in on the chords to reintroduce the melody. And then when Bergonzi comes back, he still has more ideas in the tank, and he throws out, and he improvises right to the end and brings it to a soft close. And this is a short album on whole. The final tune is only track 6, another Bergonzi original called Don't Look Back. We got a kind of mid-tempo, even beat Bergonzi original. This is kind of an airy melody and chords, open sounding, and he goes into a short solo, a lot of double time figures. Then Winter takes a short but interesting piano solo, and he finds some kind of pleasant surprises in the chord possibilities. And Bergonzi comes back with the melody, and this one ends in less than 3.5 minutes. So you got some short kind of bookends on this, but it sounded like it was a really fun live date. Great sound quality for a live recording, and you get a taste of a real sax master here. He's absorbed the tradition of modern sax from Coltrane to the modern day, but he still has, his own identifiable original tone and style. At 72, he hasn't lost any chops or passion. His energy comes through on all the tracks. The band has good energy too, this modern jazz trio, especially Winter's piano playing. Really excellent, inventive, forceful, but with a really nice sense of touch. The program's short, and also some of the tunes are short, but I like the mix. It's a sandwich of Bergonzi's original, and then we got a couple standards in the middle. So if you like kind of intense sax playing, really passionate, forceful, and a more rugged tone, this recording will be a lot of fun for you. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, there's 6 tracks on it, but I thought this was longer than, because some of these tracks are pretty long, so it kind of came across as a full-length album. It seemed short to me. There's a lot of extended soloing on it. The name of the album is Straight Gonz. It's a good title. He's really the centerpiece on this. I mean, the piano does get some good moments, like you said, but it's really about him, and he brings it. He's quite good. It's good to hear all these septuagenarian musicians. We should but doing really bringing it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he has this huge personality on the sax that comes through, that huge sound. And
you mentioned Pharoah Sanders. It's not as wild as like Pharoah Sanders, but Pharoah Sanders had a big sound. He still does.
Yeah.
But even though he's like in advanced years now, and Bergonzi is like that. He has this huge sound as well. Very just presence that just fills your ears when you hear it, and probably the stage when he's on it.
Yeah, I like his, he has that sound, and then he has this kind of biting attack.
Yeah.
That, not to say that he can't play legato and things, but generally
he's pretty aggressive as a player.
He's aggressive, and he has this huge energy, and it hasn't, diminished at all. You just feel like he's bursting to play lines whenever he comes in on a solo. So, I mean, he hasn't mellowed out as he's advanced in years, and it's exciting, and so
it's also exciting to hear that people reach this age and are still like playing like at this very high level and very appealing level as well, an energetic level. It kind of gives you sort of strength to carry on, doesn't it?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I find things like that really encouraging. We have him, Martha Argerich, and we heard this week Daniel Barenboim. I think of people like Pharoah Sanders, and we talked about Charles Lloyd earlier in the year.
Yeah. 70s, 80s, still going.
And even the 90s, Ahmad Jamal is still going.
Still going on, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
So,
all right, and that's the end of a very enjoyable week of music, I think.
Good week of music.
Yeah.
You've got, your full Saxual experience here.
I encourage listeners to listen to all 6 albums that we talked about.
Should listen to all these. They're really good.
Yeah.
And I have to say, actually, I was lucky to find all of these because last 2 weeks have been a bit sparse for new releases in the jazz realm. Oh, there are things out there, but, things that I really wanted to talk about, I couldn't find any. And then I saw these and I thought, I had 2 and I thought, well, there got to be another sax one. And then I saw that. And when I listened to all of them, I said, oh, this is great because it's 3 tenor sax albums and they're all very, very different, unique in character, which, that should be the way jazz is. When we find a player, even on the same instrument, should have a different tone, a different approach, a different repertoire, and all of these are, like that. But I have to say, I don't know, the next wave must be coming because I've already got what I want to talk about for next week. And it's going to be really good next week. We've got a piano release we've both been waiting for that's out. A piano player we're really interested in, and that's going to be good. And
I'm interested to hear this. I haven't heard this yet, so I'm kind of interested.
And surprisingly, I've got 2 jazz vocal albums that are just out this week, and you're really going to like both of them, Mike. And
I'm interested in this because I like jazz vocals a lot, and we haven't talked about that enough on this podcast.
And the reason is because I'm extremely picky with vocalists.
I've noticed that about you, actually.
I'm very critical. There's very few. Most of the ones that the critics like, I can't stand. So I'm very picky. My favorite jazz vocalists, I guess I would say, currently would be Catherine Russell.
Catherine Russell, I like her a lot, too.
Do no wrong, because she always makes me feel good. And I like Diane Reeves a lot. But she hasn't recorded a lot in recent times. But a lot of the other ones that get
you liked Cassandra Wilson back in the day too.
Yeah, you know what I liked about her a lot was she's more like a jazz musician than a vocalist. When you hear her perform with her group, she's like another instrument. And so she takes on sort of instrumental qualities, and plus she has that unique voice that doesn't sound like any other human voice like that. So I've always liked her too. But the ones I've got for next week are really good, and they bring in some other old friends that we've talked about on the podcast too.
Oh, that's always good. I'm looking forward to this already.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. So I'm really looking forward to that next week's.
I've got some odd juxtaposition of Baroque and contemporary that I'm gonna drop on people next week. Then there's another contemporary and coupled with Mozart that's kind of an odd pairing. I'm really curious to know what Russ is going to think about this.
Oh, okay.
And then there's some Brahms as well, some old favorite stuff. Okay,
Great.
So that's what I got coming next week.
Well, I guess that brings us to about the end here. I left the spiel out at the beginning, so if anyone's still with us at this point, I'd like to remind you all that in our episode description, you'll find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music we'll discuss in all of our episodes, and including this one. At the top of the description, there's going to be a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, where you can also follow us on our podcast, but you can catch the playlist to hear everything. I usually get it up early in the week. You can listen to the tunes before you listen to the podcast or after, whichever you prefer. And you'll find us there at username Adult Music Podcast. You can follow us and catch the music before the podcast. If you don't see the full description or list on your app, because some of them don't allow hyperlinks and whatnot, jump over to our host site, Podbean, where all the links are active and you can find access to everything. Now, if you enjoyed the podcast, please do follow or subscribe whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. Take a minute, give us a ranking, write a review. It's going to help us get listed in the browsing category recommendations. That's going to help us grow our audience more. We'd appreciate that. Take a minute, give us a 5-star ranking, send us a comment on wherever you listen to us.
We're at the beginning of this, so 5-star rankings help us a lot to reach more people, so we could really use those now.
If you have any other thing you'd like to let us know, you want to contact us directly, comments, questions, we'd be happy to hear from you. Our email
recommendations.
Yes, our email address is adultmusicpodcast. That's all one word at gmail.com. Go back if you heard this episode but didn't check out the Gil Rose interview that we released 2 days ago. Check that out. Classical music fans, you want to be on the cutting edge of a modern orchestra recording modern music and get Gil Rose's perspective. It was really interesting. I think you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, and if you like our interviews in general, go back to our Mike Ladon interview, which was also really interesting. Yeah,
that was a great one. He really told us a lot. One of the best, my favorite organ player. And also
a lot of good ones out there. But we like him a lot.
Yeah,
he's one of our
really
favorites.
Soulful, groovy player.
I'm pretty sure his new album, too, It's All Your Fault, will probably be one of our picks for favorite jazz albums of the year.
Yeah,
I think we both like it a lot.
It's a great album. And he's also a really great pianist, too. And you want to check that interview out as well. And we've got another interview. It's been in the bag for a long time, but we have to wait to release it. And that's going to be coming up this month. And it's also classical related, going into a forgotten master. And we're going to release it on the day that the album is going to be released as well. So you get...
that'll be July 23rd if you're...
23rd, that Friday. That's right. There's going to be a new album of a forgotten composer whose works are now being recorded, and the most insightful person who knows everything about that composer, and also the conductor of the recording.
The composer is Ranetsky, and we actually reviewed the first album in the series, and then there's the second one. I guess we'll do the second one too, just because we did the interview.
We'll do it. Because it sounds really interesting. And
after they told us about him, we kind of got more interested in him. So
and it looks like there's going to be a lot more coming. So that's good news for classical music and classical period there. So good things coming up, and it looks like the jazz releases are rolling along after I was getting a little bit worried. So at least I know next week, and I've got enough for a few more episodes. But
I'm set for the whole summer because I think the first 2 weeks in July, like a load of classical music.
Yeah, that's right. There were these huge,
out.
massive releases you sent me about. So.
No, most of them are on the Beast label. Somehow Beast just dumped all these like new amazing sounding recordings on the market. I'm really looking forward to hearing every one of them. All of them are on SACD too, which is even better. So it's going to have that high sampling rate, even surround recorded sound. It's going to be great.
Right. It's going to be a good summer. All right.
I think so
this
too.
has been episode 22 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And we're going to have another great episode coming up next week. So stay tuned, and we'll see you again next time.